Another key element in our session 1 on thriving congregations addresses the 5 flourishing practices that we've picked up through our learnings on the Thriving Congregations Initiative funded by the Lilly Foundation. And so here's our observations. And by the way, we didn't have these clearly defined when we began our initiative. These are things that bubbled up as we worked with the congregation and realized there's some missing pieces here. And, it's easy to identify indicators that we're just like build relationships or have a sense of purpose. But the question is, in this day and age where sometimes the landscape we're moving into is so unknown, we really need to also have a mindset of reinvention and experimentation. And so I want to walk through these flourishing practices that are just so critical. And the first one is really about thriving congregations that are flourishing. They inspect. They actually review their results. They do an after-action review with their worship services, with their vacation Bible school, with their hospitality ministries, with their spiritual formation. They're continuing to evaluate, hopefully through the lens of impact and reach and maybe some other elements, but is this working? Is it not? Is it reaching the right people? Is there a better way? But we need to review our results, because if we don't inspect, we can't improve. And thriving congregations are always seeking to improve, amp up their impact and their reach, and bring about more transformation. So we have to inspect our results. And I worked with a congregation in the Twin Cities that organized their missional initiatives around the 3 C's, similar to what I mentioned earlier. And one was that, again, how are we connecting people with God? How are we connecting people with each other? How are we connecting people to the needs of our community? So when they plan an event, they actually had an event planning form that they had to answer those questions and strategize. So when they designed this event, those 3 elements were already present. But what they also did at the end of the sheet, there was a questions, where did you see indicators of people connecting with God? Where did you see indicators of people actually building connections with each other? So the idea is that they actually designed the event to address those missional initiatives, but they also evaluated through that element. So just know that aspect of inspecting is really important. That's the number 1 flourishing practice. The next one is asking. Leaders as a whole, we tend to talk a lot. And I even remember one time sitting in a staff meeting, and the lead pastor talked 80% of the time, and everyone was just kind of disengaged, not listening. And I think we talk more than we should. And so I want to ask you this question, literally, do you just ask more than you tell? Are you actually sufficiently hungry and humble and curious about others that you actually see them as a source of wisdom? And you're the student and you're just going to soak up their knowledge, their perspectives, and learn about their life? Because in essence, congregations are curious. They're curious about their members. They're curious about their community. They're curious about the people they're seeking to serve. So they're asking lots of questions, knowing that each person is a source of wisdom if we only take the time to actually listen in that process. So that's the second item, is that they ask as part of that flourishing practice. And then also the observing. We don't do a real good job of observing things. We need to see worship through new eyes. I know one congregation we've worked with, they have 5 people a month that do an evaluation of the worship service. And sometimes it's a visitor from, they actually pay someone to come in and just experience this. And how is it as a first-time guest? They'll get a high school student come in and walk through, and they have kind of a criteria for evaluating that. They've had a 20-year member, but in essence, they're asking people to observe, and they're actually giving them specific exercises. What did you notice about the hymn? What did you notice about the people? Were they just sitting in pews? Were they interacting with each other? Were they coming in late to worship? Were they leaving early? Did people linger afterwards to talk to each other? They just were gathering all these observations around worship and different activities. And with that opportunity to see with new eyes, that they also ask kind of what assumptions drive some of these behaviors. And maybe there's some certain assumptions that we need to let go of or change. And so I think this idea we need to pay attention. Note again, think about the energy. Think about who's acting and who's engaged and who's not. All those things. Make a list and observe with new eyes all your programs and activities. And so that's the third one, is to find ways to observe. They're willing not only, so they ask, first of all, they inspect, they ask, they observe, and then they also experimented. So based on some things, they were willing to try something new. And most of the time we call this prototyping. They're just going to try it for a short period of time, see if it works, see what kind of reaction they get. And because most of the time we fail the first time. And if you ever heard that, well, we tried that and it didn't work. And by the way, this goes back also to this cycle of intervention that we need to inspect. The question I always want to ask people is, why didn't it work? And sometimes we've seen like an event that had flopped that was supposed to be a community thing. And by the time they actually unpack it, well, our promotion was really, went out late. We weren't clear about what we're inviting people to. We only promoted it in a couple different areas. And it's kind of afterwards saying, yeah, our community, no wonder it did. It's kind of amazing that we actually got the people we did, because we actually did such a poor job of the promotion element. So we actually have to know why something didn't work. And then the fifth one, that fifth aspect of flourishing, is that you're willing to try again. So you repeat the cycle of innovation, learning from your past results, and then try it a new time. And what we learned through this Thriving Congregations initiative is, I'll use the word, it's kind of like the third time was a charm. The first time, it might have, hey, it showed potential. We got to fix it. Then they refine it and do it a little bit different, maybe reach another audience, whatever, and they get a better result. Then they take that learning, and then the third time it's kind of, hey, I actually think this is pretty impactful. I'm excited about this. But just know that usually your best efforts don't come with just one cycle of experimentation. You need a few rounds to refine it and continue it. And ultimately, that's what these Thriving Congregations do. They're continuously inspecting and asking questions and observing and reimagining and experimenting and try it again. So Thriving Congregations create a cycle of ongoing reinvention. And that's something all of us should be doing in our own faith communities.